Okay, so I'm going to throw four names out at you of guys that are rumored to be moving on this offseason from their current situations and their current teams. Okay, so I'm going to throw four names out at you. I want you guys to leave your comments and let me know which one of these following guys would make the biggest impact if they were to get traded to the Green Bay Packers. Notice I said the word traded and not via free agency. We're going to circle back to that later on in the video. That's the key word here. Okay, so Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, DK Metcalf, Devontae Adams. Which one of those guys, given their current situation, would you think would have the biggest impact on this Packer team, helping bolster them to a championship team? Okay, so the Packers have been connected to some unprecedented trades. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at this article right here. Reggie White 2.0 for the Packers. Myles Garrett requests a trade from the Browns. I'm sure everybody is already talking about this. I'm sure every team out there is setting out a video right now being like, oh my gosh, can you imagine Myles Garrett joining our team? Okay, so in this particular case, we're talking about the Packers. Imagine Myles Garrett on one side of the field, and then you've got Rashawn Gary on the other. The Green Bay Packers defense would instantly go to one of the best in the league. That's the type of difference maker that Myles Garrett is out there. And then you've got another article coming out here that three blockbuster trade targets for the Packers to target this offseason. We're going to talk about those three guys here as well. But talking about a guy like Myles Garrett, the difference maker that this dude would have. Okay, so he's got an overall PFF score of a 92.3. That is absurd. It's absolutely ridiculous. This guy is an absolute animal and a beast. Okay, so this article says right here, we all know that Myles Garrett requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. There's 32 teams in the NFL. Okay, so we know that there's 31 eligible teams potentially eligible to go and sign a guy like Myles Garrett. I'm sure Myles Garrett is going to, if he has any say in the matter, he's going to want to probably go to a contender. Cleveland, of course, hasn't been that team over the last couple of years. So there's 31 teams that go into contention, but then you can do process of elimination because he's going to want to go to a contender. Guess who would be a contender? The Green Bay Packers is one of those teams that could be an absolute contender to get to the Super Bowl, meaning Myles Garrett would love to join a team like Green Bay or like Detroit or like Minnesota. Notice I said three teams in the NFC North that could be potential contenders to get to the Super Bowl based on this last year's performance, how successful they were in the regular season. Of course, not the postseason, but a guy like Myles Garrett certainly would add a level of Reggie White to this Packer defense. But notice the difference between Myles Garrett and Reggie White. Okay, Reggie White was a free agent. Myles Garrett would have to be acquired via trade, which means Brian Gutekunst would have to give up multiple first-round picks. Yes, I said multiple first-round picks. I think that's what it's going to take to get Myles Garrett away from Cleveland. Now, yes, he has requested a trade, and that could mean a lot of drama this offseason of him holding out and not coming to camps and all this stuff, which means the Cleveland Browns are certainly probably going to be eager to move on from him, not wanting to take on all of that drama, but at the same time, they're going to want to get the most draft capital in return of their investment in drafting Myles Garrett when they did in the first round back in 2017. And notice this dude is success right here. Okay, so he was the first overall pick in 2017. Garrett has made 4 first-team All-Pro teams and 2 second-team All-Pro teams in just 8 NFL seasons. He was the NFL Defensive Player of the Year in 2013, probably is going to be again in 2024. Garrett has produced 102.5 sacks, 24 fumbles, 200 quarterback hits, and 117 career games. Yes, he is 29 years old. He's still got a lot of gas in the tank, and they start making the correlation between Reggie White and Myles Garrett. Reggie White was 32 years old when he joined the Packers, but it was via free agency. Okay, so via free agency looks a lot different than joining the Packers in a trade. Okay, so because the Packers would just have to give up way too much to get him. Okay, so that being said, the Green Bay Packers also have some other names coming at them, and that is Max Crosby. We've talked about it a lot. DK Metcalf, there's a lot of talk swirling around DK Metcalf leaving Seattle. Of course, they'd be moving on from Tyler Lockett as well, so there's probably a rebuild happening in Seattle. And That would mean giving up DK Metcalf, and as it says right here in this article, the Packers would absorb $18 million of his salary cap in 2025. Presumably, the parties would have to sit down and discuss a larger contract. Of course, if he were to come to Green Bay, they would have to negotiate getting this guy on the books for a lot longer, which means a lot of money being thrown at DK Metcalf. Okay, then you've got Devontae Adams in that scenario. There is no world that makes sense for the Packers to take on Devontae Adams. I don't care what any fan out there is saying. The Green Bay Packers would be slated to take on 2 years, $35.64 million on an aging wide receiver who's still got a lot of gas in the tank. Don't get me wrong there, but Devontae Adams would certainly have an impact on this Packer offense. But Devontae Adams would have to be cut by the Jets in order for him to come to Green Bay and it to make sense, in my opinion. Then you've got edge rusher Max Crosby. Now that is a more realistic one, I think, depending on what they want to do with him there. Of course, Pete Carroll came on as the coach, which as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, Pete Carroll's there. He's an older coach. He's very successful. I don't see Max Crosby leaving the Raiders. Now, it would take anywhere from a first to a fourth round draft pick and then maybe a player to for them to move on from Max Crosby. And of course, that would come with absorbing his contract, which he's slated to make 23.12 in 2025, then about 19.72 in 2026. So he's worth the money, but I don't see a world where Brian Gutekunst goes out there and makes a trade, giving up draft capital and taking on the salary cap. I don't think it's absolutely feasible for him to do that. So leave your comments. Let me know. Would you rather have Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, DK Metcalf, or Devontae Adams? But my realistic opinion here when it comes to Brian Gutekunst is that he's going to have to go into the free agent market and get some signings. If you notice the Packers, he went out there and made a splash, kind of similar to when the Packers signed Reggie White via free agency. The Packers did the same thing this last offseason, getting Josh Jacobs in-house, getting Xavier McKinney in-house, two guys that made dramatic impacts on this team. I see the same thing happening for the Packers going via free agency. You look at some of the biggest names out there like T. Higgins. I think he's going to come with too big of a price tag for the Packers to acquire. You've got guys like Chris Godwin out there, guys that could have impacts, but I think the Packers are going to be targeting more like a DJ Reed out there from the Jets, somebody to probably either piggyback if they're able to restructure Jair Alexander's contract and then get DJ Reed in-house as well. Can you imagine those two teams, especially if two players, especially if Jair Alexander was able to stay healthy? I think that is the more realistic option here for Brian Gutekunst to go out there. I certainly don't think he does it via trade because that's absorbing a contract, giving up um, draft capital as well, something that he doesn't like to move on from. He's already made that evident and clear. He's looking down the road for this franchise, also looking in the current team situation. He thinks he can probably get it done via the draft or via free agency. I think that is the route the Packers are going to take, but unprecedented trade connection to these guys. I don't think it happens. Leave your comments. Let me know your thoughts. And as always, go Pack, go.